belonging to two of the largest international bodies of investigative editors globally. I've had time to work as an administrator and manager of resources, especially my experience at the Voice of America in Washington, D.C., where I worked for almost 9 years, reaching out to an audience of well over 45 million on a daily basis with news and future programs, mostly in Hausa, but some of it in English. Most of our scripts are in English, and we translate them into Hausa, but we also do a lot of interviews. I work with the news magazine and Temple during the years of military dictatorship, and until I went to the Voice of America. I've also written about 4 books. I still do research. I have 2 books that I'm still working on simultaneously. There have been a big delay since I became a minister. I also cut my teeth writing a lot of speeches, political speeches. So basically, all my life I've been a writer, but I've also transited between being a writer, a journalist, to become an administrator, a manager of men and resources. And here I am today as a Minister of Youth and Sports Development for Nigeria.
So could you take us back down memory lane? Where were you born and how was growing up like? Absolutely.
I was born in Jos Plateau State. And, my birthday is there in the Republic, May 29, 1966. And Jos Plateau State, it's known for its peace and tourism, which is the acronym they use, which is also true. As the temperate weather, virtually every exotic fruit that is grown in Europe and America and Canada really grows in Jos. A rich mix of the locals and also the expatriate community, especially the missionaries. My father was a Baptist who worked closely with a Baptist missionary. I also went to a Baptist primary school, a Baptist secondary school, a Baptist high school in Jos. So growing up in Jos, I think that was where I actually gained my nationalistic orientation, because we live side by side with people of different faiths, of a different ethnic background. But it really didn't matter whether you're a Christian or a Muslim, whether you're Hausa or Yoruba. People with the Hausa, people learn to speak Yoruba fluently. I learned to speak Hausa fluently. A couple of my Igbo friends learned to speak Yoruba. I also learned a few Igbo words. And until I left Jos, that innocence and that sense of orientation of being one remained. And then I came to Lagos and I lost all innocence. You could see the cleavages, they stared you in the face. Then I got into the media and it exploded right in my face. You could just see it down the line. It was a different world entirely. But I think that whatever I am today, you can count it to my upbringing, my growing up in Jos, going to primary school, secondary school. Some of the networks are built in Jos still exist up to today. And to a very large extent, my Jos orientation still guides most of the work I do. I put merit before any other thing. I look at merit, and then after that comes every other thing.
Wow. So could you tell us some of your studies as you went along?
Studies in which aspect?
From school to school, what did you study? Yes.
Absolutely. Indeed, of course, when I left school, I had a stint working at NEPA. For some reason, I found that I was a good writer early enough. But all I wanted to write was music. So I tried to write. First, I made sure I translated all of Bob Marley's music. I was in love with reggae music. And then, then it was psycho-styling. So I needed to publish the lyrics of all Bob Marley's songs. I couldn't publish a book, so we had to do psycho-styling. I got somebody to draw the cover for me with dreadlocks, and I stapled it together, and I was able to produce that book. And I marketed it aggressively. I never made much money from it, but it was a passion that I had, reggae music. But then I worked with NEPA for a while. I wanted to be an engineer. I loved the NEPA technology. I became a substation manager, working with the panels at night, switching the panels on, solving problems. And then my father decided to say, listen, You need to go to university. I was earning good money, and I went to the Oscars, that is Oyo State College of Arts and Science in Ile-Ife. I went to for my advanced levels in geography, government, and one other. There are three courses then in geography. Then after my A-levels completed, and that was my first direct stint in the Southwest. And of course, I got into Oscars, and I must tell you this, anecdotal but very far-reaching. And just the way I spoke Yoruba and I spoke English, people knew easily I had a northern orientation. The northern accent was there. And I had people just simply avoid me or they greet me and then giggle and pass. And I kept wondering, and people from the North Nigerians, I just couldn't. And then they had a basketball game and I came to watch. And it was agonizing to see Oscars being beaten black and blue. So I walked to the reserve bench and I said, you guys, I can play this game. They said, no, it is awesome, but can play what game? So I went to the coach. I said, listen, can you put me on this? Let me just play for a few minutes. He said, you're not even part of the team. You're not even dressed up. I said, dress me up. I'm going to try it. And I was put on the game. And I showed some talent. I made some shots. And from that day, I became a star. Because I went to Baptist Secondary School. They fed us day and night with basketball. But I moved on from there. I went to Momodu University, where I read international studies or international relations. I was the president of the International Studies Association. And shortly afterwards, I left there. I served in Abuja about 30 years ago at the Cuba camp. I was one of the pioneers that opened the Cuba camp in Abuja. When I finished, I went straight into journalism. I did a couple of freelancing, writing opinion articles, sending reports to Guardian and other newspapers. And then suddenly we had a breakaway group, which Bob D, you remember from the African Concord, the National Concord, the Bayo Nanuga group, Shaye Kainde, Babafemi Judu, Dakwodon Yomi, who finally came together. And they sought out individuals who had a radical orientation, who had been leaders, student leaders on campuses, who had been part of some level of activism. And that's how they knocked together the news magazine and Tempo group then. So I was a pioneer member. I became a correspondent for the newspaper in Jos, the magazine. And the rest is history. We ran into the troubled waters of the Babangida era, the jackboots. And then from Babangida, we ran into Abacha, and it was a rare battle. I became the editor of Tempo magazine. We were banned severally. The news was banned. But we managed to survive. We eventually survived. One of my closest and most reliable correspondents who we worked with, Bagada Kato, was not so fortunate. We were in Jos together. We traveled to Billeri, Ochi. We came to Jos. And we were to head to Abuja together at the same time where we were hiding out. I backed out that day. I just wanted to stay one more day in Jos. And that was what saved my life. He got to Abuja that evening. They picked him up. And that was the last we had of him. So I worked. I continued to work. I was lucky to get a fellowship during the critical years of Abacha. I went out for 6 months. And as soon as I finished, I insisted on returning back to Nigeria, even though Abacha was still in charge. And I came into what we call the Nadeko route. Basically, everything I bought, I jumped with Chido Onuma, who was in Ghana then. As soon as I flew into Ghana, I had to change into just a local dress. I wore slippers, got on the bike. Imagine somebody who had stayed 7 months in America and then coming back and then disguising to get into the country. I got into the country back from the plane to the bike. And then we went straight to work. We were working from different places, underground places. We had several aliases. I had about 3 ID cards. Others about 4 ID cards, so that when you are stopped and searched, you could just say, oh, an ID card shows you as a student, one as a auto repair person, another one, just all kinds. Eventually, Abacha died. And then we had an opening up. And we went back to work. Not long afterwards, I was able to get a fellowship to study at Harvard University for 1 year, all expenses paid. The Harvard University Fellowship is the #1 most prestigious journalism fellowship in the world. It's about 71 years old now. Before I went, the only person that had gone was former Governor Olusegun Oshoba, who had gone almost like 30 years before, or 28 years before I went. And then there was one other. I was the third Nigerian ever in the history. And that was the 60th year that I eventually went. I'm glad that after I went, we were able to make a proper pathway. 3 other Nigerians went. And then shortly before I finished, I was recruited by the State Department in America to come and work with the Africa Division of the Voice of America in Washington, D.C. And straight from Harvard, they made me a supervisor, the chief of the House Service of the Voice of America, where I worked for about 9 years. And eventually, I was invited to come home to work with the late Minister of Information and Communications, Dora Akinyele. I came in as a media advisor. I later became a chief of staff. And of course, after 6 months, I decided to resign. I wanted to do something different. I was not really cut out for the Nigerian bureaucracy and all of that. And when I returned to America, I spent 3 months doing a lot of research and then decided to go to Oxford. I won another fellowship to do an academic research.
Looks like a call came through. Okay. Yeah, we lost you for a second.
Yeah, I said so. I went to Oxford University as an academic researcher. I did the research on citizen journalism or online journalism and the fight against democracy, the fight against corruption, and how it helps participatory democracy. When I finished from Harvard, from Oxford University, I basically was to start my PhD when Ashwaji Bola Tinubu beckoned on me and said, we think we want to see how we can strengthen the opposition. That's when the talks about the moving from alliance to merger. So I basically came back, did not continue the PhD, and I worked with others, which led to the formation of the APC. And then we worked, which led to the victory at the polls. And basically, that's where we are today. Then I was appointed 14 months after we won the election. President Momodu became president. I was appointed the Federal Executive Commissioner at the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC, in Abuja, where I was in charge of the stakeholders.
Wow, such a long journey. I'm interested in how you navigated your way from Jos to Oscars. I was a lecturer at Oscars, 1982 to 83. So yeah. I don't know if you came in before or after, but I was teaching at Oscars. So how did you find your way? In those days, people traveled long distances for studies. I'm not sure if it's like that today.
Well, oh my goodness. That's one aspect of my life that sometimes, okay. I said I was working at NEPA and I was making me so much money. I was a star boy in Jos working at NEPA and in a good salary. So I never thought I needed a further education. It was just enough. But my father thought otherwise. Then my uncle, Engineer Lauren Leke, who was the MD of the Standard Breweries in Ibadan, journeyed over to Jos for a vacation of 1 week. And then they got talking, and my father told him, listen, this guy is brilliant, but he's just wasting his life. He's a local champion here. What can we do to get him to go to school? So he was late to get into university. So my uncle said, listen, you can go to Oscars Ile-Ife. So I was just called upon when my uncle was leaving to say, you're going to follow your uncle to Ibadan. He's going to get some things, and then you will bring the things over. Because that was the only way you could get me out of Jos and my job. So innocently, I decided to follow my uncle. But I noticed the night before I left, my mom kept coming to my room and, he's saying, oh, why don't you take this? She was trying to give me more clothes, all my favorite, the shoes. Why don't you? And I said, why are you giving me? Why do I need this? I'm going for a 3 days journey. But she knew I was not going for a longer journey. I was basically being packed up to go and start advanced levels in Ile-Ife. So she succeeded in forcing me to take a few things, but I had no ink in it. We got to Ibadan. 1 week, 2 weeks, I kept asking my uncle, where is this stuff? He said he's waiting to clear them from the port. I said, but I need to go back to my work. One day he just said, well, let's go to Dele. I need to see a friend of mine. Let's just go. I got there, they put the phone for me, and they said, yeah, you're not going back. You're staying here with me for the next 2 years. A-levels, fill the form. So I got stuck. And that's how I did my A-levels. And then from then on, I saw the beauty of education. I saw the power of education, and I never let up. What I did was that after my A-levels, the northern part of me never let go. So I had the choice of studying international relations at OAU, UNIFE, or going to Ahmadu Bello University Zaria to study international studies, which is basically the same consequently. Well, I went back to ABU Zaria. But since then, I've been an integral part of the Southwest, where I really caught my teeth as a journalist.
And that's how you miss going to Africa's greatest university.
Absolutely, something you don't want to rub it in, okay?
Yes, I have to rub it in.
But I can stand looking from Oscars in Ife.
If next done, then you chose to go to Abu. You see? Wow, fantastic. Would you say Abu radicalized you? Because I remember that ABU used to be a radical university.
Actually, my radical roots can be located in Oscars in Ife. Because the bulk of those that ended up, more than 40% of those that came to Oscars ended up in OAU, Obafemi University. And then each time, the students in OAU were kind of rioting. The lecture halls in Oscars emptied. Everybody went to join them. And the dream of everyone was to leave Oscars and just go right into OAU. And you know, OAU then, you know, the student union movement the activism was much. So my roots of pure activism started there. But Abu too, the angle must go. And when I got to Abu, it was a comfort zone because I found a lot of activists. And so, and you know, the student union strength then, there was such the spirit then. Once you're protesting, once you're fighting for a cause, the spirit that swept through the campuses neutralized whether you were in Ife or Zaria. It was the spirit of student unionism that was so strong and penetrating. So it didn't matter whether it was an ABU or Ife at that time. Once it was a student union thing, and then Abu helped me so much.
Wow, interesting. Okay, I know a lot of people are dying to know about how you veered into certain things. So, but we would concentrate more on coming back to Nigeria. What was it like working with an iconic figure like Dr. Dora Akuyili? I remember you came to see me once on her behalf, you know, and for us, she was a very special woman.
She was indeed. She was an Amazon. She was in a class of her own. And I say that without any reservation. She was one that worked almost 18 hours to 19 a day. I saw it. I lived it. I joined her at home every morning at 9 o'clock. We return home at 9 p.m. in her house. I have dinner in her house. I work till about 11:30, 12. I go back. She wanted to solve every single problem that was within assignment and even beyond. She had ideas about this country. Once she told me, she said, look, it will just be excellent one day to become the president of this country. Then I'll have the resources that I need. I will have the people that I need to delegate. I can make a difference for this country. Unfortunately, she did not live enough to become a president, but she was president in the position she held. As a NAFDAC DG, we saw her operate like a president. She brought about change. That is leadership. As Minister of Youth, as Minister of Information and Communication, two massive ministries which have now been split. It was during a tenure that we had the breakout or the breakthrough in telecommunications technology. NS Ndukwe was then the EVC. She was the minister then. It was during her tenure that we sold the groundbreaking 2.3 gigabyte, which was the bedrock of our mobile telephoning system in this country. She held on. She was a terrific speaker, both extempore and if she reads a speech. She had such an effect everywhere she went. She was down to earth. She could play well with the poor and the needy. She played well with the high and mighty. She had a laughter that was infectious, but that was Dora. And whatever happened thereafter, for me, does not in any way diminish, the excellent service she gave this country. She gave this country her very best, and we'll remember her for that.
She had to fight many battles at the ministry. Do you recollect any of them? Because I remember that was when you came to Lagos. You were supposed to even come to Ghana. Then I told you I was in Lagos. She fought so many battles. I remember my last encounter with her. She called me after I wrote the Pendulum article. And she said President Yar'Adua had just phoned her that, yes, I've read Dele and Dele has simplified the matter. And she told me, say, brother, even if I die today, you have done your own burial. I didn't know she was warning me. It was strange. She just said it like that. Said, Dele, brother, if I die today, you have already done your own funeral. I couldn't believe it. Said the president has just, she was so excited on the phone. So what really happened? The internet has frozen. Hello, yeah. Yes, I was saying she was very excited that I wrote about the problem she was having at the ministry, and that President Yar'Adua called to say he had read my article. President Yar'Adua was a handsome man. Apparently, he used to read and he would respond. I remember I wrote an article about EFCC, and Sheikh Madeni called me to say, the president has asked me to call you that he's just read your article on EFCC and he's very impressed. And the same thing with Dr. Dora Kuyili. The president called her.
Absolutely. Yeah, your recollections are very exact. She fought political battles. She even fought professional battles. In fact, the battle she fought and won at NAFDAC followed her to the ministry as a minister. Because even while as a minister, she was still a great resource for NAFDAC in fighting fake drugs across the country. But she had a number of battles politically, some of them professionally, but there were battles that were based on principles. And she got great support from late President Musa Yar'Adua, who was also instrumental in me leaving my job at the Voice of America to come and work for her. But Babdi, when you also look at the battles she fought, there were battles that needed to be fought at that time. More so, for being a woman and being that iron, there was also a price to pay for it. But like I said, she did her bit. She did her bit. She put in her very best. But you also know that in politics sometimes there's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of uncertainty. But she paid her dues. That's all I want to say.
Now you must have really gathered a lot of experience working with Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Could you tell us some of the things that you got while you were with him?
How many minutes do I have? 1 minute? 2 minutes?
No, you have the whole time. Don't worry. We have all the time in the world.
Babli, I think you've known Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu for more years than I've known him. Because when I say I've known him for about 21 years, I know you've known him longer than that. Even in my very early days as a journalist, I'd met him. And then I recall that when he became governor, In fact, when he was a senator, he was the chairman of appropriation. Segun Ayobolu was his essay then in Abuja. Myself, Alex Kaba, and Bagada Kato were thirsty for the kind of news that the news magazine loved to write, exclusives. And Senator Ahmed Bola Tinubu was so courageous under the Babangida regime. He was the only one of the few people who were willing to give us critical information for our publication. So very often in the dead of the night, we will go to the Senate to see him, or we'll have some documents ready for us. He will give us information around which we can base our investigation. So it was a very reliable source, even then, at the risk of his life under the Babangida regime, as chairman of Appropriations Committee. So I've known him since then. And when he eventually became a governor, of course, after that we had the Nadeco. He was a champion, was the founder. There's that iconic picture of you and him in London. Bob, do you remember?
Oh, very well.
When you say
my son,
when you look at that picture, it brings out the meaning that a picture is worth 1,000 words. There's a lot of story behind that picture. But during the Nadeco years, that was when I really got really close to him, because beyond funding the Nadeco, the pro-democracy group, going into exile and funding other members, he gave several lifelines to the news magazine. We were proscribed, we started tempo, the revenues were not coming in. At a point in time, we had salaries unpaid for 5 months. He came to the rescue. Then we floated AM News. We had no money for newsprint. He provided for that. He said the media must remain strong. And he kept us out there on the street through the years. We got support from several other quarters, but his own support was massive. So with the return of democracy, it was not surprising that upon his return, if anyone was going to get the immediate political benefit to reap, he was one of those that would. And he was elected the governor of Lagos State. And I recall then I had been shocked to be a press secretary. Dele had contacted me. We were about, concluding the process of being his press secretary when I got a phone call and a letter that I had won the prestigious Harvard University fellowship. And, I recall really, I was torn between being a press secretary at this time, which everybody loved, would have been, or going simply back to school. So I went to meet him. And he said, "You're going to go to Harvard. That's where you should go. Don't worry, there will always be a job for you." And I recall he gave me $2,000. You know how far, that's about 21 years ago. Any other person will have said, "Forget that, I need you now, be my press secretary." But he said, "No, you need to seize this opportunity, get further education." The Harvard thing was prestigious. Now, let me fast forward. Several years down the road, when I came to work with Dora, I also got his blessing. He said, "Look, even though it's a PDP arrangement, whatever it is, I think you're going to be serving this country." But when I went to Oxford and I finished and I came back to tell him I wanted to try to do a PhD, he said, "You don't need a PhD." He said, "I want you to stay here with me in Nigeria because we still have a political battle in our hands." He said, "The PhD you need is here, a political PhD, working to build up a new party, build up the opposition that can upstage the ruling party." And that's how I stayed. I became his media advisor and eventually
internet. Okay.
You see, being a journalist and writing about politicians and analyzing them, It's totally different from really being an aide and being part of the processes, the meetings, the negotiations, and the rest. Completely different, because you, as a journalist, was from a different window. You examine things. As somebody inside the house, it was totally different. And I will say a few things. I think that I may not have the certificate, but working for him 6.5 years, I think I've earned a PhD in politics, practical politics, because this was a man who, the moment he gets up, there are multiple meetings. 80% to 85% of the time, we close at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning. We hold meetings non-stop. And for every meeting, there must be follow-up, there must be a report, there must be contact. And he just kept at top of virtually everything, which also kept me on my toes. You know what I will always say? He said, while others are carousing in the night, I sit at the table burning the night lamp, seeking a solution to the problems of this country. And I think no true leader can really go to sleep. No true leader can succeed without holding those courts, holding those meetings. We had political meetings, economic meetings, social. Ashwaji Bola Tinubu had time for virtually every sphere of life. Politics was the center of it.
It seems we have a combination of NEPA internet. Okay.
Problem. He will listen to them. People who come, they have brilliant ideas. He will listen to them. Then connect them to people that can help them. He was also somebody that realized that in politics, you have enemies sometimes, but sometimes you will have to find a middle ground. Like they say in Yoruba, Agbatio Bino is a man that is widely loved, but also is a man that is hated. But we have seen that the strength of the people that love him has kept him at top of Nigeria's politics. Now, working with him, for me, was a new type of discipline. It was like restarting a different phase of my life. I had been a guerrilla journalist. I had worked overseas. I'd read the nadir of my career. But coming to work with him, we x-rayed Nigeria's problems almost on a daily basis. We saw the practicality of the problem fixed. And I think his commitment to moving from alliance to merger was unshaken. I will give you an anecdotal example, which I recall very well. After all the meetings and the crisscrossing across the country towards the formation of the APC, it fell on him to host the convention of the APC, the first convention of the APC in Lagos, Onika Stadium. But then on that day, he had to be the first person to surrender the 5 APC states that he controlled. And the risk was there. If you surrender those APC states, return the certificate, and then nothing comes out of APC, you will have lost. So there were interrogations. What happens? You have 5 control now. The moment you submit it to the Commonwealth, APC, you have nothing. What happens to you eventually? He said, what happens to Nigeria is what matters. But I believe in this union. And I recall I was with him till 5 a.m. in the morning of that convention. I wrote a speech. He kept changing one aspect to another, kept changing one aspect to another. At 5 a.m., he walked up the stairs. And I gave him the final copy of the speech. And then he put it in his pocket and said, do I really have to read that speech? I said, yes, Your Excellency. That speech, you have to read that speech. Now, when he says that, I've learned to make sure I print 4 copies of the speech. Because if he doesn't want to read a speech, he will find a way to forget it. And then he will say there's no copy. So I have like 3 copies. So when he says he can't find it, I give him another one. If he loses that, I'll give him another one. So I was prepared. But the point is, we got to the convention ground, and he gave one of his best speeches at the Onika Stadium Yeah, and he had no doubt. He was bold enough to surrender his control of the states, and the rest is history. Because from that point, APC became strong. We had other parties join the CPC, and then we built that momentum that was needed for that merger to eventually take power from a government that's been in power for 16 years. And it's not easy, really. But I think beyond him, Nigerians also provided the votes, but also President Momodu Buhari provided the leadership. He just had the right qualities that the country needed at that time. So my experience with Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, basically you can put it in three lights. Politically, it showed that people must be at the center of their politics. Secondly, to be a leader, you must make sacrifices, not just financial sacrifices. Your time, your family, you must be willing to make sacrifices. And closely related to that, you must have a thick skin. Because the moment something doesn't go your way, the moment you're abused and trashed, and you want to turn back and do nothing else, you must learn to be a long-distance runner to remaining in the politics of this country.
Wow. The internet again.
Is that you must be humane. The tendency to be a politician, influential, powerful, rich, and then that part of being humane, being generous, being compassionate, leaves you. Tinubu is a very humane person. I've seen him help people. I've seen him get a text from somebody in Maiduguri, a woman he never knew. I've seen him call up one of his aides, give him millions of naira, and say, get on the plane, find the woman and give her. And I think so many people can talk about what he has done. Sam Omashe actually wrote a book of his kindness over time. So those three things abide for me, first as a minister, but also just as a Nigerian, that in whatever capacity I find myself, I must make sure that people are at the center and the core of what I do. I must learn to be humane, but also be ready to take attacks, criticisms, and also just stand strong, even when things are so cloudy and dark.
What would you say are the advantages of the fact that you are multilingual?
Can you repeat that?
I said, what would you say are the advantages of your ability to be multilingual? You speak Yoruba, you speak Hausa, a little bit of Igbo, and of course, you speak impeccable English.
Thank you very much. I think that being able to speak Hausa and English, and indeed Yoruba, I don't even know which one I speak better, whether it's Yoruba or Hausa or English, but at least I manage. This country is blessed, and part of our blessings are our customs and traditions, and also the language. Building a network of friends has come to me as quite easy because of the language I speak, or the languages I speak. You find it easy to blend when you're in the north or you're amongst Hausa-speaking people. You find it easy to blend when you're in the southwest. Unfortunately, I don't speak much Igbo. Professor Dora, got me a teacher, and then I skipped so many Igbo lessons, but I can pick a few words. But I think the power of language anywhere, even if it's French or English, the power of language in terms that it helps communication, it builds relationship and trust. It also helps you to navigate very difficult situations and circumstances. I think I've been lucky to be able to speak some of our major languages, and I've been able to employ that to build a network of friends. It might interest you that the job I got in the Voice of America, apart from being a journalist, the fact that I could speak Hausa and I understood Hausa No one, I never thought in my life that being able to speak Hausa and understand Hausa would be a major factor in landing me a job and a fantastic position.
In America, for that matter.
My advice is that every Nigerian should learn to speak one other language apart from your language. It's very important.
Fantastic. Now let's go to your present assignment, national assignment. Or do you want to start from NCC? Could you tell us briefly about your stint at NCC?
Well, I had a 3-year stint at NCC. But I must thank President Momodu Buhari for finding me worthy to be appointed as the Federal Executive Commissioner, Stakeholder Management at the Nigerian Communications Commission on about the 2016. I served there for 2.5 years. And a position of great responsibility when you look at that was the height of when digital technology, but also telecommunications became a major contributor to our GDP, a major revenue earner. We also had almost 175 million Nigerians with telephone lines. We also had the OTT revolution, where we have social media platforms, the over-the-top communications, the WhatsApp, and all of that. So it was, for me, an important position to be able to be part of the policy implementation as it regards to the communications industry in our country. I was in charge of managing stakeholders, and the stakeholders, matrix is a long one. But on top of that stakeholder matrix is the mobile service operators. That is the MTNs of this world, the Globalcom, the Airtel, the 9Mobile from Etisalat, but also the entire value chain. Of course, the consumers like us, like you, but a lot of Nigerians, you own a telephone line. We had a responsibility to ensure that the quality of service was good. We had a responsibility to make sure that what you pay for is what you get. We took complaints, we dealt with them. So basically, sitting on top of the telecommunications industry in the country was important for me. I gained a lot of insights. I had the opportunity to make sure that we improve quality of service. That was the most important thing, the quality of service. But also we saw how that sector has expanded. Well, after that, about 18 months.
Please bear with us. The internet goes off sometimes.
All right. So after that, barely about 2.5 years, going into my 3rd year, I was again appointed by Mr. President, found me worthy to be nominated as a Minister of the Federal Republic. And of course, after the Senate screening, we took the oath of office, and then I was announced as the new Minister of Youth and Sports Development. And of course, when I was appointed and nominated as a minister, for me, it didn't matter what portfolio they gave me. For me, I was ready. Whatever portfolio I was given, I was ready to give my best. And why? I felt that then I was about 50, 53 plus, almost 54 then. I should be 55 in 2 months' time. I felt I had garnered enough experience at that time, but within the country, internationally, I built a lot of network. So I was ready. And I was grateful, even though I got youth and sports. Many saw it as not a rich portfolio, not a robust one. But for me, I saw it as a whoop. This is work. From that moment, I knew that my job was cut out. We look at the youth and sports. These two mandate areas, they have the 2 largest audiences. When it comes to youth, you see the youth budge, 70, 75 million and growing. Massive audience. When it comes to sports, more than 120 million Nigerians love their sports, be it football or tennis. These audiences are audiences that are also tech savvy, and I put it in quote, and I'm careful about this, impatient for success. They want to see things happen. They want to see things go the right way. So I embrace this work. Like they say, I had no choice than to hit the ground running. And my first challenge was to make sure that I brought the radar with the same intensity that was on sports development. I brought the radar to youth development. Put both the youth and sports development at even keel and find a way to push it. In my interest to know, 61% of those involved in sports in our country today are the youth of this country. So it's no mistake to say youth and sports development.
Oh. Wow.
Whether it's in culture, it was important to have a clear agenda of what we want to make of our youth. Today, the single largest problem confronting our youth, beyond skills, is unemployment. And then you can now start to kind of break it down to say, why are they unemployed? But the first major problem is unemployment. Then we start looking at why are they unemployed? Is it that they are not skilled, they are unskilled, they are not educated, they are not trained, there are no resources, there are no opportunities, and then you now start to deal with them. Now, there are no silver bullets here at all. But what we did was to audit some of the programs we've had at the youth ministry that dealt with it went beyond empowerment. We had to do a paradigm shift from mere empowerment to look at how we can start to invest in our youth. Move beyond just giving them pocket money, to look at how we can upskill them and turn them into creators of wealth, employers of labor. How we can turn their mere paper education to some technical skills that can make the difference for them. And what we did was to kind of build on and expand and deepen what has been on ground. And if you allow me, one of the things we came up with was to come up with DEAL, D-E-E-L. We called it a new deal for the Nigerian youth. That is D for digital literacy, because we saw that there was a digital skills gap in Nigeria, like we have in all of Africa. So D stood for digital skills, literacy, and acquisition. The first E there was for employability. How do we make sure that our youth were employable? The second E is entrepreneurship. Bob D, there is no country that has been able to solve the problem of youth unemployment without turning its youth into entrepreneurs. You look at the Asian tigers, you look at Thailand, one of the highest youth unemployment rates in the world. As we speak, Thailand has 2% unemployment rate amongst its youth. What did it do? It invested in its youth, gave them access to credit, to finance, to soft loans, and turned so many of them, placed them on the path of entrepreneurship. They became MDs of their companies. They were employers of labor, creators of wealth. Of course, some of them failed. More than 50% failed, but they rose up again. They also provided them training, business management, basic accounting, and then we saw what happened. It took time, but they started gradually. And I think the L stands for leadership and mentoring. So we said digital skills training, employability. How do you make them employable?
Internet.
To get them started. They don't have to wait for 1 year to get some kind of soft loan. They don't have to pay 21%. And then we got started. Of course, we are taking off. And what really short-circuited our flight was COVID-19. COVID-19 came and, we started to struggle. But also in sports development, we came up with the idea that we needed to focus on proper sports development, that we should depart from just going for competitions, preparing for competitions, going to win and come back home, then wait for the next competition. That's not sports development. We wanted to take our sports development beyond attending the All-African Games, the Commonwealth Games, the World Cup, the Olympics, and develop our sports from the grassroots. So we came up with the idea of the 3 I's, that for us to have a proper sports development, we need infrastructure, we need incentives, we need investment. But above all, the undergirding principle of grassroots sports development finding the young stars, finding the young talents, and putting them through a process. All of this is going on. It's just 18 months, of which almost 8 months or even more yanked off by the pandemic. But I think we set sail on an irreversible course. Ours is to set and reset the fundamentals of our youth and sports development. And having laid that with the full support of President Momodu Buhari, we believe that in the ensuing years, some of what has been laid now and is being laid will be able to meet the aspirations of our youth across the country.
Now, one of the problems I have, especially with sports in Nigeria, is that you have a national stadium in Lagos that is practically moribund. You have a national stadium in Abuja, nothing is happening. So, as Minister of Youth and Sports, what are you doing to make sure that at least places are not wasted the way they are?
Well, thank you so much. I think that one of the first things that confronted me as a minister, because Nigerians really gave a feedback, was to complain about wasting sporting infrastructure. Some of them dead, some of them wasting away. And it's good you talked about the National Stadium Surulere and the Mashoda Abiola Stadium in Abuja. Both of them national monuments. But you know, right now we have 4 stadiums with the federal government: Abuja, Kaduna, Lagos, and Obafemi Awolowo in Ibadan, former Liberty Stadium. Let me just speak to what we did. We were convinced that for our sports development to serve our youth and to be meaningful at all, we needed to provide the necessary infrastructure. We came up with what we called an adoption initiative plan, which had about 3 flavors: adopt a pitch, adopt an athlete, and adopt a facility, as the case may be. And we developed it along a public-private partnership based on a CSR model. We were able to approach and do a presentation to Alhaji Aliko Dangote. We invited him to help us bring back and renovate the main bowl of the National Stadium in Abuja, Mashoda Abiola Stadium. And he agreed to do that and committed to fixing a stadium that suffered for over 10 years, complete negligence. As we speak, work is at almost 70%, and he's funding it directly. We hope that on or before June, that stadium will be back fully. And our national team can not only play in the main bowl, but also we've been able to maintain and bring up to speed some of the other facilities within the stadium. The practice pitches are working. On a daily basis now, you can see almost 200 people in the stadium in Abuja. I also work from the stadium once or twice a week. I've moved part of my office to the stadium, and that is presently ongoing. The velodrome, one of the best in the world, that was leaking and broken down before, the velodrome is back now, clean. We just hosted last year the African Championships for the Cyclist Association for the entire Africa. It's also listed as one of the best velodromes for cycling in the world. When you move forward and you look at the story of the National Stadium Surulere, I think the glory of our sports, football and other sports, is best told through the eyes of National Stadium Surulere. 17 years on, suffered terrific, complete, total neglect. So we set on making sure that we bring it back. We also did the same proposal and presented to Sir Keshington Adebotu, who we know that he has been a philanthropist when it comes to sports and grassroots, even at the national level, and he was able to partner with us. As we speak, that stadium is under renovation. The main bowl of the stadium, the 10 late and we hope that by June, in the summer or July, we'll be able to bring back at least 60% of the 2 stadiums, the Mashoda Abiola Stadium and also the National Stadium Surulere. But we also did something that was novel in Surulere. We realized that the Surulere Stadium had become not exactly a stadium anymore, but a landing ground for all sorts of social activities at night, a drinking, restaurant, a kitchen. So we just did an audit, set up a task force. We found out that more than 135 shops were illegal shops. Some of them concrete, some of them makeshift. And we gave them time. We checked their documents, and then we shut down the stadium, and we pulled down every single illegal structure. And after we did that, you could just stand on the bridge or even walk, and you see the beauty, the overhead bridges and the flyovers. The stadium itself was like a city on its own, but we had lost all of that glory. So we cleaned it up. We just reopened it in January. The swimming pool is open. People can only go in between 7 in the morning and 6 p.m. at night. Those commercial activities will not return. If they will return, they will return under a specific code. We're happy to say that we have approval to start looking at how to build some kind of shops, because so many Nigerians were displaced, so that they can also come sell sporting equipment and the rest, but no longer a drinking beer parlor or a restaurant or a kitchen for anybody. Now, that is the story of those two national stadiums. Kaduna, Ibadan, we're looking at getting partnership with the state government or private individuals. Our goal is to make sure that we bring back these 4 national monuments. One serving the north, both of them serving the country, and then we can start to go beyond the brick and the mortar. What are the equipment, sporting equipment that we need, the high performance center that we need, just to start that process of bringing back the fundamentals of our sports development.
Wow. Now, one of the biggest problems in your ministry is usually the lack of adequate funding. So do you think government does not think the ministry is important enough, or how come? And that's what you always say when they say you're in Siberia. So what are you doing about funding your ministry?
Well, I think that the ministry, the government sees the youth ministry and sports ministry as important. I can only speak for this government and speak within the confines of my tenure. Within the confines of my tenure, I can speak to the kind of support I've received directly from Mr. President, directly from members of the Federal Executive Council, who have supported every single member brought to council concerning youth development and sports development, but also through Mr. President, who has given the listening here. You look at this government, in the last 5.5 years, we've had about the highest number of youth development programs in this country. At the top of that program, of that pack, is the Empower, impactful. It remains the largest youth empowerment program in sub-Saharan Africa. Then in July last year, I presented a memo to Council for the establishment of the Nigerian Youth Investment Fund, NYIF, a fund like no other, which will invest directly in the skills and innovative minds of our youth, give them the lowest interest rate ever, give them a moratorium they've never enjoyed. All they needed to do was make sure you have an established business, or if you don't have an established business, you're just starting, there's a ceiling of how much you can get. But then you must apply yourself to the process. Apply, fill up the questionnaire, provide the necessary information that will help to determine where you fall in the loan scheme, and then take a training on business management. So you look at Empower, you look at NYIF, 2 big programs rolled out by the government. In between those 2 programs, there are several other programs, the AGMIS and agriculture, and several ministries, about 7 ministries are doing just a lot of programs. So we've seen a departure. We've seen the concentration on youth development and sports development increase in the last 5.5 years. And I think that for me, as an insider, it can only get better because we're working to get more resources. Just in 2021 alone, we've been able to get a budget that was equivalent of the 3 years budget. What we have this year is the equivalent of our 3 years budget in the past. And you can say that the NYF is a 75 billion naira fund. That kind of money had never come to that ministry before. But also the challenges remain. We've decided to develop, as the government has directed, that we should look at the PPP, public-private partnership. We've seen that innovation, and we've been able to leverage on that. The fact that the National Stadium, the Mashina Biala Stadium, is ongoing right now is because we leverage on the public-private partnership. But also, we're going to place some of them on the part of concession. Concession also is at the heart of public-private partnership. The National Stadium is already on the part of concession. The Atlas Hostel in Abuja is on the part of concession. Eventually, other sporting assets of our country, as soon as we get approval, will be on the part of concession. So we think that with dwindling government resources, our best chance is to build, develop, and apply the public-private partnership model to bring private money, leverage private money into sports development. But please, let me say this. It's under this President Momodu Buhari, that for the first time since we became a nation, that we got the approval for the reclassification of sports, for instance, as business. Sports has always been recreation, referred to as play. And you look at the greatest sporting nations in this country, sports has always been business. This government has reclassified sports as business. We've been working in the last 16 months to put together a review of our national sports policy, which we call the sports industry policy. We hope that between now and May, we'll be able to deliver for this country a sports development model that has a business model in it that turns sports into business. A full partnership with the private sector that will see government play its role, but also see the private sector bring in the resources. And importantly, who will be the beneficiaries? The value chain of sports development can provide job opportunities for the mass of our youth. If you look at the value chain, it's just massive. It can also provide GDP of 1 to 2% or 3% to our economy. But also, it also places value on our athletes, footballers, athletes, boxers, wrestlers, and the rest, because they get better value for their talent. And we think that with a sports policy that is robust, with a business model, this country can join other countries of the world that have a robust sports development.
Well, talking about sports as business, I remember that Globacom, for example, used to be one of the biggest investors in football. I don't know what went wrong. The GlobeCAF Award, for example, was taken away. Is there anything your ministry is doing to make sure that you can get those companies that invest in football? Because football is important to every Nigerian. In fact, football seems to be the only unifier. The only time Nigerians will talk about religion or ethnicity is when we're playing soccer. So what are you doing to reach out to companies such as Globacom and others to come back into serious sports investments?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I do say often that football is king, but of course, other sports are also important. But football is king, and it's been able to give back to other sports, support other sports, basketball, athletics, wrestling, and others. Yes, my approach is this. Our football development is faced by two challenges. One is the challenge of leveraging on private sector participation and sponsorship. When you look at global football too, without private sponsorship, it will not be where it is right now. The second challenge is that of grassroots sports development when it comes to football. You look at our glory years, the height of our football glory. We had grassroots football development that produced youngsters from the academic house to the principal's cup, who formed the tree of our football teams. You graduated to the rank and file and then played for this country, won laurels from this country. Some of the biggest names ever in our football. Odegbami, Shagun Odegbami, Mudashiru Lawal. I can go on and on. Amokachi. They were battered through the Principal's Corps and the academicals. And then some 20-something years ago, we abandoned all of that. So we had to wait for our footballers to get plucked from here, taken overseas, play for a foreign country, and then we begged them to come and play for us. In the past, we had a factory of stars. They just graduated naturally and they played the best football in the world. So we've started to reinvent that process. We brought that grassroots football. We started Principal's Cup. The finals of this year's Principal's Cup, which is a miniature one, is a test run. The finals will be on 30th Tuesday in Abuja, the finals of the Principal's Cup. And then we hope that will start that process. But also, we also think it's important that those in charge of our football administration develop a grassroots or youth football program that can become a national program that will see us also pick talents from everywhere. The second aspect is sponsorship. We've also enjoyed the best of years of sponsorship. The Glow CAF Awards. Fantastic. We've audited what went wrong. We've gone past the period of apportioning blames. And what you've seen us do with Dangote, we've had success with it. Sam Debutu Kashintin, we've had success with him. We're walking our way back to Chief Adenuga. We're working our way back to Boa and a couple of other people, but especially Chief Adenuga. We want to make our case, present our case, a new vision, because without sponsorship from the private sector, our football will still not be where we want it to be.
Hello, can you hear me?
I'm with you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. One area is the development of our local leagues. It's embarrassing how Nigerians scream about foreign clubs, and they are fanatical, and we don't seem to enjoy the same passion at home. What are you doing to encourage local leagues and the football clubs? We all used to know about Levante stores. You know, we used to know about Enugu Rangers, ICC, and all of them. And so what are you doing, you know, as a ministry to bring our leagues alive and to encourage those who invest in local leagues? I remember the Abiola Babes in those days and all of them.
Right. Well, you know, the NFF, a parastatal under the Ministry of Youth and Sports, is actually mandated to develop our football, particularly also the local league. And we've had a history that led to the formation of the LMC, and that is in charge of the Premier League. And we have the NNL. And of course, you know, when you just back up and you look at the years of Biola Babes, Levantes United, and the rest, you will see three constants there. The first constant was the Levantes, the ICC, the Abiola Babes were funded privately and massively. Two, the talents needed to play beautiful football and competitive football were being produced in droves because we had the academic house, the principal's club, the inter-house, whatever. And then thirdly, they had the eyeballs. There was content on television. You could watch most of these games and matches on television. Now, how did we get here? We lost the content. We lost the private companies and investors. We lost the young talents, raw talents. They just basically disappeared. Now, unless we return these three key components, we cannot have our football and the development that we wanted. But also there was discipline in terms of following the financial and licensing regulations. That was the regime of discipline. So what have we done? We work with the NFF to start a new regime of enforcement. Companies or football clubs having a minimum amount that must be available before they can play in the Premier League. We started enforcing the licensing regime and also the financial regulations that are necessary. That's one, and that's ongoing.